They said the billionaire's jet went down over the Alps, but inside the mansion he built, a 10-year-old girl just drew the truth. The wind moaned through the glass walls of the Helion estate like a ghost too proud to rest. From his study overlooking the Mont Blanc range, Leonard Varese stood still, watching the snow blur into an ocean of white silence. Once, he was the man who made oil prices kneel. Now, at 68, he looked like a relic abandoned by his own empire. He set his crystal glass down on the obsidian table. The amber liquid trembled as if afraid to break the silence. Behind him, the bronze eagle of Helion Global caught a beam of light and threw it back at the room, a golden glare upon a man who had forgotten how to shine. "Adrian," Leonard said, voice low and raw. "What would you do if one day you realized everyone around you was just acting?" Dr. Adrian Cole, his private physician for 2 decades, looked up from a stack of medical charts. "I'd stop," he replied calmly, "just to see who's still there when the curtain falls." Leonard gave a weary smile. "That's why I trust you. You still believe in souls." In the mirrored wall before him, he saw 2 reflections, one man standing, one already fading. The disease eating him wasn't in his brain. It was in his faith. For 40 years, Leonard had traded loyalty for power, until both became currencies no one could afford. Outside, Geneva burned with purple dusk. The city glittered like a promise he no longer believed in. On his desk lay the latest financial report signed by Miranda Keene, Helion's CFO, once his brightest student at ETH Zurich, now a woman carved from ice and ambition. He read the final line of her internal memo: "Proposal to transfer executive authority to Orion Trust Fund to ensure operational continuity in the event of incapacitation." "Orion Trust," Leonard whispered. A name that sounded like a star, distant, beautiful, and deadly. That night, sleep refused him. In the quiet glow of his office, Leonard unlocked a hidden drawer and drew out a metal drive, etched with the words, "For when truth is too late." He powered on the estate's forgotten security network, a web of silent eyes and hidden microphones known only to him and a single Swiss engineer long gone. Every hallway, every chamber, every breath inside the mansion flickered onto his screens. "I may have trusted too much," he murmured, "but at least I'll choose how I vanish." On the central monitor, a simulation loaded. Flight VZ-903, Mont Blanc route. Engine failure sequence, active. A fake crash. A planned death. An experiment in loyalty. Morning came like a verdict. Miranda Keene entered his study with Gareth Holt, Helion's strategic advisor, once his son's closest friend. Both dressed in quiet arrogance, carrying folders like weapons. "Mr. Varese," Miranda began, her tone sweetened by steel, "your health is declining. Gareth and I have prepared a contingency authorization for emergency transfer of control. It's for the good of Helion." Leonard's gaze never wavered. "For the good of Helion," he repeated slowly, "or for Orion Trust." Gareth gave a polite smile, the kind men wear before betrayal. "We're only securing the company's future for when you're no longer with us." Leonard set his glass down. "And if I'm still here?" Miranda's lips curved, razor thin. "Then, sir, perhaps it's time to consider becoming a legacy rather than a burden." The air froze. He understood then. This was not a test of loyalty anymore. It was the beginning of a hunt. When they left, he spoke quietly into the intercom. "Adrian, prepare everything. We vanish at 9 tomorrow morning." The last night before his death stretched long and brittle. Leonard sat alone in the glass observatory while snow howled outside. The reflection of firelight rippled across his face, carving out the lines of a man trying to negotiate with fate. He opened his old leather notebook and wrote the final line of his life as a public man. If Helion ever falls into the hands of liars, let truth survive through a child, even one who never knows she holds the world. Through the frosted glass, he saw a small figure dart across the courtyard below. Lila, the housekeeper's daughter, carrying her paint box against the storm. She paused, looked up at the light from his window, and waved. Leonard raised a hand in return, just slightly. It was the first genuine smile that had touched his face in years, a crack of warmth through the glacier of a lifetime. 9:00 a.m., the next day. Breaking news tore through global headlines. Energy tycoon Leonard Varese presumed dead in private jet crash near Mont Blanc. Stock markets quivered. Condolences flooded in. A black car rolled out of the Helion mansion carrying a coffin that held nothing but air. Beneath the estate, a steel door hissed open. In a chamber lit by cold blue light, Leonard Varese sat before a wall of monitors, alive, eyes sharp, hands steady, the ghost of his own empire reborn. He watched the live feed of his mansion, Miranda and Gareth in the grand hall, whispering like vultures dividing the bones. The security cameras obeyed only him now. He leaned forward and whispered, almost to himself, "If they wanted to bury me, they'll soon learn. Ghosts don't die. They remember." The hum of machines answered him, low and endless, like the heartbeat of the storm outside. And somewhere upstairs, the little girl named Lila drew a golden sun on white paper, not knowing that her innocent crayon would soon light the fuse of a war between greed and grace. The corridors of Helion's private medical wing were built like cathedrals, glass, marble, silence. Every sound carried an echo of reverence and deceit. Dr. Adrian Cole walked them with a heart that no longer trusted what his eyes saw. The entire building, once his place of work, now felt like a stage dressed for manipulation. On his tablet glowed the headline that had broken the world only hours before. Helion Global mourns the passing of founder Leonard Varese. Adrian stared at the words, his reflection faintly visible in the screen. Alive, but part of a funeral that had not yet buried its secrets. 3 days before the supposed crash, Miranda Keene had summoned him to the medical office overlooking Lake Geneva. She had worn her power like perfume, sharp, invisible, inescapable. "Adrian," she said smoothly, sliding a digital folder across the desk. "You'll need to finalize the neurodegeneration file. The chairman's health is declining faster than expected." Adrian frowned. "That's impossible. The tests last week were normal." Miranda's expression didn't change. "Then you'll simply need to make them less optimistic. Investors need stability, not miracles." He froze. The weight of her words was surgical. "You want me to falsify his diagnosis?" Miranda leaned forward, her gaze like ice meeting glass. "No, doctor. I want you to cooperate, as you always have. Think of it as protecting his legacy." For a moment, Adrian could hear nothing but the hum of the fluorescent light. Legacy. It was the word they used before they killed something that still breathed. That night, Adrian reopened Leonard's medical archive, tracing each scan, each blood marker, each file. Everything was precise. Too precise. A single line of metadata caught his attention. Modified by M. Keene, 02:11 a.m. His pulse quickened. He searched further and found a duplicate folder hidden beneath layers of encryption, one labeled NV Protocol. Inside, false charts, doctored brain scans, a projected decline curve matching the final phase of corticobasal degeneration, a disease that slowly steals your body, then your mind. He exhaled, trembling. The perfect lie was already alive in the system. He wrote an encrypted note for Leonard. "They're turning your illness into your execution. Meet me tonight." But the meeting never happened. On the highway from Geneva to Chamonix, Adrian's car left the road and spun 3 times before bursting into flame. The police called it fatigue. The report filed by Gareth Holt, who happened to be the first at the scene, was signed and sealed before dawn. Inside his burned vehicle, a tablet melted into glass and ash. No one noticed that its GPS logs ended 15 minutes before the crash, near the Helion mansion. Down below that mansion, Leonard watched the report play on one of his many screens. His face did not move, but his knuckles whitened around the armrest. He had heard the explosion through the mountain wind. He had known Adrian's voice would never sound again. And for the first time since faking his death, he whispered a prayer, not to God, but to whatever mercy still remained between power and ruin. "You shouldn't have trusted me, Adrian," he said softly. "You should have run." On the next monitor, the boardroom appeared. Miranda and Gareth sitting side by side, their eyes sharp with new authority. She wore black for the cameras. He adjusted her microphone with the familiarity of a partner in crime. "Helion Global will continue Mr. Vares's vision," Miranda declared. "Our chairman's passing was sudden, but we are prepared. Orion Trust will ensure the stability of our global assets." Leonard leaned closer to the screen. "There it is," he muttered. "The coronation." But fate has a way of hiding truth in innocence. That same afternoon, Rosa Delgado, the housekeeper who had served him for 10 years, brought her daughter Lila to the mansion for the first time since the tragedy. The estate had been declared vacant, but Miranda allowed staff to retrieve personal belongings before Helion's lawyers sealed the property. While Rosa packed linens in silence, Lila wandered off, drawn by the reflection of sunlight through the long corridor. She peeked into a small office, Adrian's old workspace. On the desk lay a broken frame and a piece of paper still pinned under a glass shard. She brushed off the dust. It was a note. The words faint, but legible. "They're turning your illness into your execution." Lila tilted her head, frowning. The handwriting looked strange, urgent, almost trembling. She folded the note, slipped it into her pocket, and left a small drawing in its place. A yellow sun, and a man standing alone on a mountain. That night, Leonard discovered the drawing while reviewing the security footage. The cameras showed a small figure entering the forbidden corridor, standing on tiptoe, reaching the desk, and leaving behind that little sun. He froze the frame, staring at her face. A child. 10 years old, dark curls, brown eyes wide with curiosity. The daughter of the Maid. The only soul who had unknowingly stepped into the graveyard of his secrets. Leonard lifted the paper, his eyes softening against his will. Beneath the crayon lines, he could still see the indentation of Adrian's note. The universe, it seemed, was giving him one last messenger. "You again," he whispered, remembering her wave in the snow. "You shouldn't be here, but maybe you were meant to be." He placed the drawing beside his keyboard, where it glowed faintly in the blue light of the monitors. A small, defiant sun in the house of ghosts. Later that night, in the boardroom above, Miranda and Gareth met again. The air between them was electric, heavy with greed disguised as grief. "It's done," Gareth said. "Cole's death was ruled accidental. Orion's transfer papers are ready. The shareholders will approve them within the week." Miranda crossed her legs, swirling her glass of wine. "Perfect. Then the world will remember Leonard as a visionary and forget the man. She glanced at the portraits lining the wall. Helion's founders, their eyes painted with devotion and dust. He built this empire believing loyalty was eternal. We'll show him it's just arithmetic. Neither noticed the faint click from the vent above them. The hidden microphone Leonard had reactivated an hour earlier. Every word, every betrayal, every whisper of arrogance was being recorded. In the darkness of the hidden control room, Leonard leaned back, the faint reflection of their faces flickering on his lenses. He could hear Miranda's laugh, sharp, victorious, cut through the static like a blade. And yet, in the corner of the desk, the crayon sun still glowed. He looked at it, and for the first time in years, something inside him began to thaw. Adrian tried to save me, he murmured. But maybe it's the child who will save everything. He turned off the sound feed and let the silence breathe. The snow outside fell thicker, covering the world in a sheet of white, as if heaven itself was trying to erase what men had written in greed. Snow fell like powdered glass over the Alps, sharp, quiet, and merciless. The world woke to breaking news. Private jet carrying energy tycoon Leonard Varese missing over Mont Blanc. By midday, the words had changed. Confirmed crash, no survivors. Stock markets trembled. Helion Global's shares fell 8 points within an hour, then rebounded after Miranda Keene's public statement, calm, composed, and rehearsed. Mr. Varese was a visionary, she told the cameras, standing before a sea of microphones and marble. His spirit remains the guiding force of Helion Global. The board and Orion Trust will ensure his dream continues. She said it with the perfect balance of grief and control, and the world believed her. No one noticed the faint smile that flickered at the corner of her lips when the cameras turned away. Underneath the mountain, the man she buried alive opened his eyes. The hidden bunker beneath Helion Mansion was silent, except for the steady hum of servers. Leonard Varese sat alone before a wall of screens, his breath fogging the cold air. Each monitor displayed a piece of his world: the boardroom, the villa entrance, the lake, and the children's playroom where Lila often left her drawings. He reached for his mug, now cold. The digital clock read 08:37 a.m. Geneva time, precisely 17 minutes after the official crash report. Perfect timing, he murmured, adjusting the security feed. They've declared me dead before breakfast. On one screen, Miranda stood in the press hall, flanked by Gareth Holt. On another, Dr. Adrian Cole's memorial notice flashed briefly before being buried under market updates. Leonard's eyes hardened. They burned you twice, Adrian. Once in fire, once in silence. He opened a private console, entering a string of encrypted commands. A hidden camera in Helion's boardroom flickered to life. Through the static, he saw Miranda pouring champagne into 2 glasses. "Here's to new beginnings," she said. Gareth replied, "To Orion, and to ghosts who die quietly." Leonard watched them toast. Then he pressed a key and began recording. Far above, in the main hall of the mansion, Rosa Delgado polished the marble floors that had once echoed with Leonard's footsteps. Every stroke of her mop felt heavier now, grief mixed with fear. Her daughter Lila followed behind, tracing the sunlit dust with her fingertips. "Mama," she whispered, "why do they cover all the mirrors?" Rosa looked up. Sheets of black silk hung over every reflective surface, a Helion tradition after the death of its founder. "Because," Rosa said softly, "when someone dies, mirrors can hold their spirit too long." Lila frowned. "But what if he's not gone yet?" Rosa froze, her fingers tightening on the mop handle. "Don't say that, Lila." But the child's eyes drifted upward, toward the chandelier that hummed faintly. Somewhere, she felt eyes watching her. Down in the control room, Leonard saw her through the monitor. Lila stood in the sunbeam like a small flame against the marble's cold gleam. She looked straight toward the camera, though she couldn't see it, as if her gaze could pierce through glass and wire. He whispered, half to himself, half to her, "You still believe in warmth, don't you, little one?" He switched screens. The financial terminal displayed Helion's live stock data, numbers flowing like blood through the veins of a dying empire. The Orion Trust account was expanding by the second, millions siphoned in under the pretense of charitable transition. Leonard leaned forward. So that's where the body is buried. Meanwhile, Miranda was on a private call from her penthouse. Her voice was low, but the camera in her office caught every word. Yes, the chairman's will was executed as expected. No living heirs, no claimants. Orion holds controlling interest now. Proceed with the Zurich transfer. She paused, smiling faintly. Yes, he died believing it was his choice. Poetic, isn't it? Leonard clenched his jaw. His reflection on the dark screen stared back, not the face of a victim, but of a hunter reawakening. Poetic, he repeated, until the poet rewrites the ending. 2 days later, a storm struck Geneva. Lightning slashed across the night sky, illuminating the mansion's windows like brief flashes of judgment. Inside, the generators hummed. Rosa tucked Lila into bed in the servants' quarters and whispered a prayer. When the storm's peak passed midnight, a faint chime echoed through the estate, a door opening where none should have opened. Lila sat up. Her small bare feet touched the cold floor as she followed the sound. The corridor was empty, but a thin line of light leaked from beneath the door of the east wing, the one forbidden to all staff. She turned the handle. Inside, the room was filled with screens. A single chair faced the wall of light. On the desk lay her drawing, the yellow sun she had left days ago. The man in the chair turned. "Don't be afraid," Leonard said gently. Lila's breath caught. She didn't scream. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but in wonder. "You're not dead." He smiled faintly. "Not yet. But let's keep that between us, shall we?" She nodded solemnly, as if entrusted with the most sacred secret in the world. They spoke in whispers that night. Lila asked if he was a ghost. He said perhaps he was, but a ghost who still had work to do. She told him about her mother, about the people in suits who shouted in the halls, about how Miranda had smiled while everyone else cried. Leonard listened, truly listened, in a way he hadn't for decades. "Do you know why you keep drawing suns?" he asked softly. She thought for a moment. "Because even if clouds are heavy, the sun is still there. You just have to wait." Leonard's throat tightened. "That's very wise." "My teacher says I'm strange," she said, shrugging. "But Mama says I just see things early." He smiled. "Then maybe the world needs you to see for both of us." When Rosa came looking for her daughter an hour later, the door was closed again, the room dark. Lila was already asleep in bed, her small hands still clutching a folded note. It read in Leonard's handwriting, "Keep your light hidden, little one. Shadows fear it." By dawn, the storm had cleared. In the world above, news anchors mourned the great visionary lost to the sky. In the world below, Leonard Varese began cataloging every deceit, every transaction, every falsified signature. He opened a new encrypted folder labeled Phoenix. Inside, he started to piece together fragments. Adrian's missing test data, the Orion Fund transfers, the audio of Miranda's call. His empire had been hijacked, but he still owned its heartbeat. He looked again at the small drawing beside his keyboard. the yellow sun, still bright against the frost-blue glow of the screens. He whispered, "You thought you buried a man. You forgot. I built the wind." The storm passed, but the mansion still breathed like something half alive, the echo of thunder trapped in its marble ribs. Leonard Varese had spent the night awake in the bunker, eyes fixed on the glowing sketch before him. A crude yellow sun, drawn by a child who did not yet know she had changed the course of an empire. He touched the paper gently. Crayon dust stained his fingertip, faintly gold. "How absurd," he whispered, "that a world of billion-dollar lies can tremble before a child's truth." Upstairs, morning crept through the high windows of the servants' wing. Rosa Delgado, still weary from the storm, found her daughter sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by paper and crayons. "What are you drawing, mi cielo?" she asked. Lila didn't look up. Her small tongue pressed against her lip in concentration. "I'm finishing the sun for the man who isn't gone," she said softly. "He said the light has to stay hidden." Rosa's hands froze around the breakfast tray. "What man?" "The one who built this house," Lila replied without looking up. "He was in the bright room. He smiled at me." Rosa's breath vanished. "Lila, you must never say that again, do you hear me? People get hurt for saying things like that." The girl blinked up at her mother, puzzled, then nodded slowly. "Okay, Mama. But he was kind." Rosa said nothing more. But that night, when she prayed, her voice shook. In the hours that followed, Leonard monitored the mansion quietly. Every hallway camera, every whisper of light through the curtains, all under his silent command. Yet his eyes kept drifting back to one feed, the small room where Lila drew. He watched her hum, erase, begin again. She seemed to live in a world untouched by ambition, by greed, by death. He envied her. He had once built engines that captured the wind, but this child had captured something rarer, peace. At noon, Lila appeared again in the east corridor, clutching a small basket wrapped in cloth. She glanced around like a spy from one of her storybooks, then tiptoed toward the hidden door. When she knocked, Leonard hesitated. He had not been touched by human kindness in years, and yet here was a 10-year-old girl knocking on the tomb he had built for himself. He opened the door. She entered shyly, the way light enters a cathedral, soft but undeniable. "I brought you something," she said. Inside the basket was a single slice of bread, a few strawberries, and a folded napkin. "Mama says sharing food makes people less sad." Leonard looked at her, wordless. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. She nodded. "You're the man everyone's talking about on the TV, the one who disappeared. But you didn't disappear, did you? You just stepped sideways." He almost laughed. "Stepped sideways? That's what my teacher says when someone hides in plain sight." He leaned back in his chair. "You're far too clever for your age." "Everyone says that when they don't know what else to say," she replied simply. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was healing. Lila wandered around the room, curious. Screens flickered, faces, numbers, blueprints of betrayal. But she seemed drawn not to the data, only to the corners where dust gathered, to the warmth of light reflected on metal. "What are all these?" she asked. "Memories," Leonard said. "And mistakes." She nodded solemnly, as though she understood. "You should draw something nicer over them. That's what I do when my paper gets too full of dark colors." He smiled faintly. "And what do you draw, Lila?" "Always the same thing," she said, pulling a crayon from her pocket. "The sun. Because even if the sky is full of smoke, it still waits behind it. She knelt beside his desk and began to draw on a scrap of paper. Her hands moved quick and sure, her tongue pressed between her teeth again. When she finished, she pushed the drawing toward him. It was a large sun with 3 tiny figures beneath it, 2 tall, 1 small, all holding a torn piece of paper together. Leonard stared at it for a long moment. "What is this?" "That's what I saw that night," she said innocently. "Those people in the shiny room were fighting over a paper. They ripped it. Then they laughed. The woman had red nails." His pulse stopped. Miranda. The boardroom. The transfer contract. Lila had unknowingly drawn the very scene of betrayal. Through a crack in the wall, through the eyes of a child. He rose from his chair, the air suddenly thin. "When did you see this?" "That night, Mama said I couldn't sleep because of thunder," she said. "I was scared, so I walked around. They didn't see me." Leonard's mind raced. A child's memory had just become the only witness to a billion-dollar crime. He returned to his desk, opening the encrypted logs. Timestamp 22:16, the night before the fake crash. Security footage confirmed it. Miranda and Gareth tearing papers, laughing, sealing the contract that would transfer Helion to Orion Trust. He turned to Lila. "You've done something extraordinary," he said softly. She blinked. "Did I do something wrong?" "No." He knelt to meet her eyes. "You just saved something very big, even if you don't know it yet." Her eyes shone. "Like a hero?" "Like a light," he corrected. That evening, when Lila left, she waved again from the corridor. Leonard stood at the door long after she disappeared. The echo of her footsteps faded, but their warmth did not. He looked once more at the drawing, the torn paper, the 3 figures, the unblinking sun. It was not just art. It was evidence. He placed it inside a clear folder, labeling it Truth Seen by Innocence. Later that night, he wrote a message to an old ally, Robert Kane, Helion's external counsel, a man too principled to survive long under Miranda's reign. He used an anonymous address, ghost@helion.net. Subject, The Sun Sees Everything. Body, begin review of Orion Trust documents. Source is visual evidence. Trust no one within the board. Await my signal. The Ghost. He hit send. Then he sat back, exhausted but alive for the first time in years. On the monitor, Miranda appeared again, this time speaking to a private audience of investors in Monaco. She smiled beneath the chandeliers, golden and cruel. "The legacy of Leonard Varese," she said, "will shine on through us." Leonard looked at her image and whispered, "You're right, Miranda. It will shine, just not the way you think." He turned off the feed, leaving only one screen lit, the security camera from Lila's small room. She was asleep, one hand curled under her cheek, the other holding a crayon. Outside her window, dawn spread like the slow unfurling of gold. Leonard smiled faintly and whispered, "Even the coldest glass can keep a little warmth." Helion Global had always been a machine, sleek, cold, and tireless. But after Leonard Varese's death, it became something hungrier. In the weeks that followed, the boardroom turned into a theater. Every morning at 9, Miranda Keene arrived in her charcoal suit, lips painted the color of blood behind glass. Gareth Holt waited beside her, always one step behind, like a shadow pretending to be loyal. They spoke in language too polished to sound human. Transition, stability, continuity. But everyone in that room could smell it. Power had changed hands, and with it, morality had died. From the underground bunker, Leonard watched them through his cameras. The once beloved faces of his executives were now masks. He had built Helion as a cathedral of innovation, and now it was a mausoleum of greed. He whispered, "So this is what the living do to the dead." On his desk lay Lila's drawing, 3 figures tearing a paper beneath a blazing sun. He had scanned it, magnified it, analyzed every detail. The torn document matched exactly the shape of the Orion transfer file. A child's crayon had caught what no camera had. It wasn't just a picture, it was testimony, innocence, recording corruption. He picked up his phone and began typing. To Robert Kane. Subject, Phase 2. Begin the leak. Upstairs, life continued. Rosa noticed the mansion growing colder, emptier, haunted not by ghosts, but by silence. One afternoon, while changing the sheets in the guest wing, she overheard 2 of Miranda's aides whispering. "They're moving the funds next week," one said. "To Orion?" "No, through Orion, into something offshore. Gareth's handling it." Their laughter was brittle. Rosa's hands tightened around the linen. She said nothing. But that night, she prayed again for the man her daughter claimed wasn't dead. Meanwhile, in the lower halls, Lila returned to her secret visits. Leonard never called for her. She simply appeared, as if guided by the pulse of light that still flickered behind the walls. This time she brought a new drawing, a tree with roots wrapped around a golden coin. "What is this one?" Leonard asked. "It's what Mama said," Lila replied. "That money grows strange roots. It pulls things down." He stared at her. "Your mother's a philosopher." "She says she's just tired." He chuckled softly, but the words stayed with him long after she left. That night, he began his counterattack. He sent an encrypted package to 3 journalists he trusted, people who had once exposed oil cartels and corporate bribes. The file contained fragments of truth, doctored medical records, ghost signatures, encrypted financial transfers. The sender's name appeared only as the Ghost of Helion. By dawn, the world was whispering. Was Leonard Varez murdered? Is Helion Global under shadow control? What is Orion Trust? Stock tickers flashed red. Miranda canceled her morning appearance. Gareth ordered tighter security, but the more they tried to contain it, the faster the rumor spread, like sunlight through cracks in marble. At the mansion, Rosa was summoned to Miranda's office. The CFO's voice was calm, but her eyes glinted with threat. "Your daughter," Miranda began, "has been seen wandering near restricted areas. That cannot happen again." Rosa bowed her head. "She's a child, Senora. Curious." "Curiosity is dangerous in this house," Miranda said, "especially when it wanders into ghosts." Rosa's stomach turned cold. "Do you understand me, Rosa?" "Yes, ma'am." When she left, Miranda poured herself a glass of wine, her reflection flickering in the mirror, fractured, sharp. Behind her, Gareth's voice murmured, "We need to find the leak." She turned. "We will. Even ghosts leave footprints." Down below, Leonard saw everything, the conversation, the tone, the threat. He clenched his fists. "So now they hunt the innocent, too." He opened the security map of the mansion, disabling 3 hallway cameras. Then he wrote a short note and printed it on Helion's old letterhead. "Let the child stay. She brings light to this house." At midnight, Rosa found the note slipped under her door. The signature at the bottom was impossible. LV. Her knees weakened. She pressed the paper to her chest, eyes filling with tears. For the first time since the crash, she allowed herself to believe what her daughter already knew. 3 days later, Miranda and Gareth hosted a strategic summit at Helion Tower. The press called it the Resurrection of Helion. Leonard called it the Feast of the Living. From his monitors, he watched as they unveiled their next move, the full merger of Helion Global and Orion Trust, effectively erasing his name from history. As they signed the final contract, Gareth leaned toward Miranda and whispered, "To the empire of the living." She smiled. "And the ghosts who built it." That smile was still frozen on her face when every screen in the hall flickered black, then came alive again, showing a single line of text. "Helion does not belong to the dead or to thieves." Gasps rippled through the audience. Security scrambled. Miranda's eyes went wide. She recognized the signature at the bottom of the message, LV. Gareth hissed, "Shut it down!" But before they could, the feed changed to a grainy image of the Helion boardroom, dated the night before Leonard's death. Miranda and Gareth laughing, tearing a paper in half. Lila's drawing, come to life. Panic erupted. Investors shouted. Cameras flashed. Leonard sat below the earth, watching it all unfold, calm as winter stone. He whispered to himself, "You wanted ghosts. Now you'll have them." That night, the mansion was tense with fear. Rosa locked the doors. Lila couldn't sleep. She kept hearing footsteps where there should be none. At 2 a.m, she found a folded envelope on her pillow. Inside was a single sentence in elegant handwriting. "You saw the truth first. Don't be afraid to keep seeing." The ghost. She smiled, clutching it to her chest, as if it were a letter from a guardian angel. Down below, Leonard watched the security feed of her tiny room. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to exhale. Not victory, not peace, but something close to faith. The next morning, news channels around the world exploded with headlines. "Helion leaks Sheikh global markets." "Orion Trust under investigation." "The ghost returns." Miranda held a crisis meeting, her calm mask finally cracking. "This is an attack," she spat. "Someone inside is feeding data to the press." Gareth rubbed his temples. Maybe the ghost isn't inside. Maybe he never left. She shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't start believing fairy tales." But deep down, both of them knew fairy tales had power, because sometimes they were true. Below the mansion, Leonard closed the file marked Phoenix. He turned off the monitors one by one until only one remained, the feed from Lila's room. The child slept peacefully, her hands glowing faintly yellow from the crayon she'd forgotten to put away. He whispered, voice trembling with something like gratitude, "The living conspire for power, but the dead conspire for truth." He turned off the light. Above him, dawn spread again, soft gold through the cracks of Helion's fortress. And for the first time in months, the ghost smiled. The night Helion turned against itself, the air in the mansion changed. What had once been merely cold now felt alive. Every light flickered, every reflection shimmered like breath on glass. Servants whispered that the house was haunted. They weren't entirely wrong, because the ghost they feared was watching them. Deep beneath the marble floors, Leonard Varese sat before his glowing screens, invisible yet omnipresent. The data streams pulsed like veins. Security feeds blinked in rhythmic silence. From his vantage point, he could see everything. Miranda's restless pacing, Gareth's clenched fists, Rosa's trembling hands as she tucked her daughter into bed. He whispered to himself, "I built this empire on light, and now they hide in shadows." Upstairs, Miranda stood by the grand piano, staring into the mirror that had begun to fog from within, though the room was cold. For the first time since the fake crash, her composure cracked. They're calling it the Helion Ghost, Gareth said from behind her. Anonymous leaks, coded emails, old employees getting mysterious messages with your signatures on them. Miranda didn't turn. Then find the ghost, she said evenly. And kill it. He hesitated. And if the ghost is him? She turned, eyes sharp as frost. Then we'll finish what we started. At dawn, Rosa was summoned again. Miranda's voice was a scalpel, smooth, gleaming, deadly. Your daughter, she said, wanders too freely. Some of our guests find it suspicious. Rosa swallowed. She's just a child, Senora. She doesn't understand these walls. Walls keep people safe, Miranda said. And sometimes silence keeps them alive. She handed Rosa an envelope. Severance pay. Take her and go, tonight. Rosa's heart sank. She bowed, whispering, Thank you, though the words tasted like ashes. Leonard saw it all through the cameras. Rage burned through his veins. Not the cold anger of a billionaire wronged, but the pure fury of a man watching innocence crushed by power. He turned to the control panel and typed a single line of code. Cameras blinked, doors unlocked. He whispered, No one leaves this house tonight. That evening, a soft rain began to fall, washing the windows like tears the mansion could not shed. Rosa packed hurriedly. Lila stood by the window, staring at the darkened lake. Mama, she said quietly, the lights are on in the forbidden room again. Rosa froze. Don't go near there. But he might be lonely. Rosa dropped to her knees, grabbing her daughter's shoulders. Listen to me, mi amor. We are leaving. Tonight. No more drawings. No more secrets. Lila nodded, but her eyes were sad, not for herself, but for the man she called the one who stepped sideways. In the control room below, Leonard paced like a storm in human form. He had planned his counterattack carefully, each leak, each revelation timed like a chess move. But this, Miranda threatening Rosa and Lila, was beyond the rules. It was personal. He opened the private channel to Robert Kane. They're preparing to erase witnesses, he typed. Understood, came the reply. Authorities will need evidence. They'll have it, Leonard answered. By tomorrow, the mansion will speak. At 9:43 p.m., the first strike came. A spark in the east wing. Then a burst of light, fire crawling up the curtains of the main hall. Panic erupted. Gareth's men shouted through the corridors. Electrical fault! Contain it! But Leonard knew better. This was no accident. He zoomed in on the feed, saw Gareth's enforcer, a thick man with a scar, pouring accelerant near the kitchen. They weren't putting out fires. They were creating them. He switched systems instantly. The mansion's old fire suppression network, his private invention, came alive. Hidden valves hissed open, releasing a mist that smothered the flames in seconds. Smoke curled into shapes against the lights, shapes that almost looked human. A ghost had intervened. From the corridor, Rosa screamed, clutching Lila. She thought it was over, until the lights cut out completely. Blackness swallowed the house. Then, through the silence, a voice came from the intercom. Low, calm, familiar. Rosa, Lila, don't be afraid. Go to the cellar door. Now. Rosa froze. Senor, Leonard? Lila's eyes widened with a mixture of wonder and relief. I told you he wasn't gone, she whispered. They ran. As they reached the hidden cellar entrance, the door slid open automatically. Inside, warm light glowed, and for the first time, Rosa saw him, alive, older, eyes blazing with both sorrow and resolve. He stepped forward slowly. "I'm sorry," he said. "You were never meant to be part of this war." Rosa fell to her knees. "My God, you're alive." "Yes," he said softly. "But they made sure the world wouldn't know." He turned to Lila, who stood perfectly still, as if meeting an angel she had already drawn before. "Hello again, sunshine," he said. She smiled. "I knew you weren't a ghost." He chuckled faintly. "No, but tonight I might as well be." Above them, Miranda's voice echoed through the mansion's loudspeakers. "Security! Sweep every floor! Someone's tampering with the system!" Leonard looked at the ceiling. "Let her shout," he said. "The house listens to me now." He guided Rosa and Lila deeper into the tunnel. "You'll stay here until I finish this. Don't leave until you see the sunrise." "But," Rosa began. He turned, his voice suddenly steel. "Promise me." She nodded. When he returned to the control room, the mansion cameras were chaos. Smoke, running guards, Miranda shouting orders, Gareth smashing equipment. Leonard began the upload. Every file, every secret recording, forged document, and transaction log streamed into a secure server connected to Robert Kane. The truth was leaving the shadows. "Let the world see the rot," he said. "Let them hear the ghosts." In the main hall, Miranda stood before the shattered mirror, breathing hard. Her reflection broke into 7 jagged fragments, and in each one, the faint image of Leonard Varese appeared. She spun around, heart pounding. "Show yourself!" she screamed. In that moment, every light in the mansion came on at once. The grand chandelier flared gold, flooding the hall with light so bright it erased every shadow. And from the speakers came a voice that stopped her breath. "You took everything, Miranda. My name, my work, my peace. But you forgot. I designed this house. I designed its silence. And tonight, the silence is mine." Her knees buckled. Gareth turned pale. "Leonard?" he whispered. On the nearest monitor, his face appeared, calm, spectral, alive. "You wanted a ghost," Leonard said. "Now live with one." By the time the authorities arrived at dawn, the fire had been contained. Rosa and Lila were found unharmed, asleep beside a half-burned basket of crayons. Miranda and Gareth were gone, vanished into the night. And beneath the mansion, Leonard sat motionless, the morning light filtering through the vents like mercy. The war was far from over, but something inside him had changed. He looked at the small family asleep on the screen and whispered, "Maybe ghosts aren't the ones who haunt. Maybe they're the ones who still protect." He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, rested. Fire has a sound, not just the crackle of wood, but the whisper of truth breaking free. When the first tongues of flame licked the outer walls of Helion Mansion, Geneva's dawn was still hours away. Inside, chaos moved like wind through corridors. Alarms screamed, smoke rose in spirals, and somewhere beneath it all, a ghost smiled. Leonard Varese watched from the control room as the house he built began to consume itself, the symbol of his empire turning into a cathedral of ash. "Beautiful," he whispered. "Even ruin tells the truth." On the monitors, Miranda and Gareth shouted orders. Their perfect masks had fallen. Now they looked like frightened children lost in a burning palace. The fire had started near the archives, the place that held every contract, every signature, every proof of their crime. It was Gareth's idea, of course, to erase the evidence once and for all. But Leonard was faster. He had already copied every document to an encrypted drive hidden behind a false panel in the control room, and one duplicate tucked gently into the hands of a sleeping child. Lila. Hours earlier, before the flames began, he had gone to the cellar where Rosa and Lila were hiding. The candlelight trembled on his face, deepening the lines carved by loss and time. He knelt before the girl, holding a small black drive no larger than a coin. "This," he said quietly, "is the heart of the truth. If something happens to me, keep it safe. Someday, someone will ask what really happened here, and you'll have the sun." She frowned. "It's not a sun." He smiled faintly. "It will be, once the light touches it." Now, above him, that light came in the form of fire. The mansion's east wing glowed like a sunrise built of flames. Miranda coughed through smoke, dragging a metal case of files toward the exit. Gareth stumbled beside her, shouting into his phone. "The servers! The vault! We have to—" A sound cut him off, every speaker in the mansion clicking on at once. Then came his voice. "Good evening, Miranda. Or should I say, good ending." Her blood froze. "Leonard." "You should have left the servants alone," his voice echoed, calm and devastating. "You might have survived greed, but not cruelty." Gareth spun toward the cameras, shouting into the smoke. "Where are you, old man? Come out!" "I never left," Leonard replied. "I live where you never looked, between your lies." The lights went out. For 3 long minutes, the mansion was pure shadow, the kind of darkness that remembers everything. When the emergency generators kicked in, the great hall was empty. The portraits of Helion's founders had fallen, their glass shattered. Only one image remained standing on the wall, a framed copy of Helion's founding charter, signed by Leonard himself. Across its surface, soot had drawn the shape of a single wing, as if the eagle of Helion had tried to take flight one last time. Outside, sirens wailed. Fire engines arrived, red lights slicing through fog. Police sealed the grounds, confused by the layers of security and the still-active surveillance system that seemed to control itself. "No casualties reported," one officer said. "But someone's inside," another replied, pointing to the monitors that still flickered with camera feeds. In one of them, a figure moved. An old man, walking through smoke with steady steps, coat glowing silver in the firelight. Leonard. He moved through the burning hall like a man walking through memory. Every step echoed with decades of empire, arrogance, regret. The mansion he had built to celebrate power now burned as a pyre for truth. He reached the main piano room, the one where he had first drafted Helion's manifesto 40 years earlier. The firelight made the ivory keys gleam like bones. He touched one, and the soft note rang out. Fragile, human, pure. From the shadows, Miranda appeared, coughing, her once immaculate face streaked with ash. "Leonard," she rasped. "You're alive." He looked at her almost kindly. "Alive enough." "You don't understand," she said, desperate now. "It was never about the money. It was survival." He shook his head. "Survival never required betrayal." She stepped closer, trembling. "You made us this way. You built a world where only power mattered." Leonard's eyes softened, not with pity, but with something deeper. Recognition. "Yes," he said, "and you proved how right I was to destroy it." A noise behind her. Gareth, carrying a gun. His hands shook. His voice cracked. "This ends now," he shouted. You don't get to haunt us anymore. Leonard raised a hand. You're trembling, Gareth, just like you did when you signed my death. Gareth's finger tightened on the trigger. And then, the sprinklers roared to life again. Jets of water burst from the ceiling, dousing everything in cold rain. The fire screamed, shrinking back. In that moment of confusion, Leonard pressed a hidden switch on his watch. A low hum filled the air. Every screen in the room flickered on, projecting the same image. Miranda and Gareth's signatures on the Orion contract, side by side with their recorded conversation, their laughter, their crimes. The entire room became a courtroom of light. Do you remember these words? Leonard asked. He died believing it was his choice. Miranda gasped. Gareth dropped the gun. You didn't just kill a man, Leonard said quietly. You killed the soul of what we built. Then he turned, walking into the smoke as security forces burst through the doors. The officers froze, seeing him, the man they thought dead, moving calmly through the flames. Sir! One shouted. But when they reached him, he was gone. Only the faint echo of his voice remained through the mansion's speakers. The dead do not burn. Only lies do. By morning, the fire was out. Helion Mansion stood half-ruined, its walls blackened, its halls soaked, its secrets scattered like ash. Police detained Miranda and Gareth. The media swarmed, and from an anonymous account, a final file appeared online, the Helion dossier, containing every proof of their corruption. At the top of the document, one line read, "Released by the ghost, for the living to see." Rosa and Lila awoke in a small guest room the police had secured. The house around them smelled of smoke and rain. Lila stirred first, clutching something to her chest. The little black drive. "Did he make it?" Rosa whispered. Lila smiled through tears. "He said the sun always waits behind the clouds." Rosa kissed her forehead. Then maybe he did. Outside their window, the first rays of morning broke over the lake, pale gold over a house that had finally stopped lying. Far away, on a hillside overlooking Geneva, an old man sat watching the smoke rise. Leonard Varez wore a plain coat and carried no name. In his pocket was a single sheet of paper, Lila's drawing of the sun and 3 figures tearing a page. He unfolded it gently, smiling. "Even glass can keep warmth," he murmured. "Even ghosts can find peace." Then he turned toward the light climbing over the Alps. Quiet, invisible, alive. The day of judgment arrived wrapped in rain. Geneva's sky hung low and gray, as if heaven itself leaned closer to listen. Inside the towering glass atrium of Helion Global Headquarters, reporters crowded like a tide of restless light. Cameras blinked, microphones reached, voices tangled into a single hum. The ghost hearing, they called it. The day the dead would speak. Miranda Keene entered first. Her once perfect poise had cracked into something brittle. She wore black, not for mourning, but for armor. Behind her came Gareth Holt, eyes sunken, suit wrinkled, clutching a briefcase like a lifeline. At the head of the chamber sat the Board of Inquiry, flanked by government observers and journalists from every major network. A long oak table stretched between the accused and the empty chair reserved for Leonard Varez. Empty, for now. The chairman cleared his throat. This hearing concerns allegations of corporate fraud, falsification of medical records, and deliberate manipulation of Helion's executive succession. The deceased founder's name has been invoked. A voice interrupted, deep and steady. Deceased? Heads turned. The doors opened. Leonard Varez stepped into the hall. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed like lightning. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes, cold silver, still carried the gravity that once moved markets. No guards stopped him. They didn't dare. He walked as if every step erased a lie. Miranda froze. The blood drained from her face. Gareth whispered, "Impossible." Leonard reached the empty chair, pulled it out, and sat. "Let's continue," he said quietly. "I'm here now." The chairman stammered, "Mr. Varez, the world believes—" "I know what the world believes," Leonard cut in, voice even, "because that's what they were told to believe." He looked directly at Miranda. "By her." Miranda tried to compose herself. "Leonard, you don't understand it." "Oh, I understand," he said, leaning forward. "I understand the cost of silence. And I paid it so you could reveal yourselves." He opened a small case on the table and took out a hard drive. The same black drive Lila once held like a secret son. "I recorded everything," he said. "The contracts, the forged medical files, the night you laughed over my fake death. I kept the proof, not for vengeance, but for truth." Gareth slammed his fist. "This is madness. You disappeared. You abandoned your position." Leonard turned to him with calm pity. "I didn't disappear. I waited to see who would remain loyal when power left the room." He paused. "Now I know." He slid the drive toward the board. "Open it." On the massive screen behind them, video began to play. Grainy, time-stamped, Miranda and Gareth in the boardroom, laughing, tearing the contract, saying the words that had doomed them. The audience went silent except for the flicker of light against faces filled with disbelief. Miranda's voice from the recording echoed through the hall. "He died believing it was his choice. Poetic, isn't it?" When the video ended, the room was ice. Leonard rose. He walked slowly to the center of the chamber, turning to face the cameras. "This is what happens when ambition loses its soul," he said. "When loyalty becomes currency and truth becomes collateral." He looked around the room, not at his enemies, but at the crowd watching through glass, through screens, through history. Helion was built on light. We gave the world cleaner energy, safer skies. But somewhere along the way, I let it become a mirror of myself, proud, blind, empty. I faked my death to see what lived in the shadows. Now I see. Only greed survives where love is gone. Miranda's voice trembled. "You think this absolves you? You created this hunger. We just learned how to eat." Leonard turned toward her, eyes full of something she couldn't name. "Then maybe I deserve to burn with you," he said softly. "But first, I'll end the feast." He faced the board again. "Effective immediately. All Helion assets transferred to Orion Trust are frozen. Every profit gained from fraudulent contracts will be redirected into a new foundation. For the workers, for their families, for the children who still believe warmth can exist in glass." He lifted the small drawing Lila had made, the yellow sun with 3 figures beneath it. "This," he said, holding it high, "was the only witness who never lied." The entire hall went still. One journalist whispered, "Who drew that?" Leonard smiled faintly. "A 10-year-old girl who saw the truth while all of you were too busy watching your reflections." He turned toward Miranda one last time. "You wanted to live forever, Miranda. You will. In the memory of what power looks like when it forgets to feel." Miranda's voice broke. "You don't know what it's like to be powerless." He interrupted gently. "Oh, but I do. Powerless is when a man with everything learns that no one would cry if he vanished." A hush fell. For a moment, even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. The chairman finally spoke. Mr. Varez, do you have any final words for this inquiry? Leonard nodded slowly. Yes, he said. Just one. He turned toward the crowd, toward the world. Truth is not a weapon. It's a light. Those who fear it have already burned. Then he placed the drive on the table, bowed his head slightly, and walked out, through the same doors he had once entered as a titan. This time, the applause was not for his wealth, but for his courage. Outside, rain had stopped. A thin beam of sunlight broke through the clouds, landing on the pavement where Leonard paused. Rosa stood there, holding Lila's hand. The girl ran to him, smiling. "You did it," she said simply. He knelt. "No, we did it. You saw the truth before anyone else." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crayon. "Can I fix something on your drawing?" He laughed softly. "My drawing?" She pointed to his coat. "You forgot the sun." He knelt lower and she pressed the crayon to the fabric, a tiny yellow mark glowing against the dark wool. "There," she said. "Now you can carry it too." Reporters shouted questions. Flashes burst like sparks, but Leonard heard none of it. He looked at Rosa and Lila, then up at the sky breaking open. For the first time in years, he felt something real. Not victory, not vengeance, absolution. "The world doesn't need another empire," he murmured. "It just needs people brave enough to stay kind." They walked away together through the golden rain. A man reborn, a woman forgiven, and a child whose light had outshone a billion-dollar lie. The storm that had followed Helion for months finally broke. In Geneva's courthouse, light spilled through tall windows like a verdict from heaven itself. The trial was no longer just about corruption. It had become something larger, a confession of an era, the weighing of human greed against one man's resurrection. Miranda Keene sat in the defendant's chair, wrists trembling above the polished table. The woman who once spoke like a queen now whispered like a ghost. Her lawyer read through charges: fraud, conspiracy, falsification, obstruction, attempted manslaughter. Each word landed like a bell tolling the end of her empire. Across the aisle, Gareth Holt refused to look up. His face had lost its color. The man who once orchestrated billion-dollar deals now sat folding and unfolding his cufflinks, over and over, as if trying to erase fingerprints from sin. Leonard Varez entered quietly. No entourage, no spectacle. Just an old man in a gray coat, carrying a single envelope. The crowd turned. Reporters whispered, pens frozen mid-sentence. He walked to the witness stand. "Mr. Varez," the judge said, "you are aware you are not required to testify today?" Leonard nodded. "I am not here for the court," he said softly. "I'm here for the truth." He placed the envelope on the stand. Inside were printed copies of the Helion dossier, every email, every forged signature, every bank transfer. The proof was absolute. But instead of reading from it, Leonard spoke from memory. "Once, I believed control could protect what I loved. I built walls of glass and called them safety. I surrounded myself with those who mirrored my strength, not my honesty. So when the world began to rot, I didn't notice. I was too busy polishing the glass." He turned toward Miranda. "I gave you opportunity. You gave me the truth that even brilliance can starve without conscience." Miranda's eyes glistened. "You think I wanted this?" she said bitterly. "You made us worship profit, Leonard. You built a world that eats its children and call it ambition." He nodded slowly. "Yes, and that's why I must pay too." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Leonard reached into his coat and took out a document. Handwritten, sealed with his ring. I am transferring all remaining Helion equity to a new entity, the Loyal Light Foundation. Its purpose, to educate and protect the children of Helion's workers, the ones we forgot while we fought for crowns. He paused. Because the world doesn't heal when the guilty fall. It heals when the innocent rise. The judge looked at him, almost reverent. Mr. Vares, are you asking for leniency on behalf of the defendants? Leonard's gaze softened. I'm asking for humanity, he said. They have already lost everything that mattered. Let justice be light, not fire. Miranda stared at him, stunned. The woman who had plotted his downfall could not comprehend mercy. You should hate me, she whispered. He shook his head. I did. Until I saw what hate turns into. Smoke, fire, ruin. You already carry your punishment. A tear traced down her cheek. Gareth bowed his head, unable to speak. Outside the courthouse, thousands waited. Screens across the world streamed the hearing live. For the first time, Helion's story wasn't about profit margins. It was about conscience. People watched, not a scandal, but a resurrection. Inside, the judge delivered the verdict. Miranda and Gareth, convicted, sentenced to 10 years, parole eligible for 5 with restitution and community service. But the final statement was unexpected. This court recognizes Mr. Vares's testimony as an act of extraordinary moral restitution. In a world obsessed with vengeance, mercy remains the rarest justice. As they led Miranda away, she stopped beside Leonard. Why? She asked, voice breaking. After everything? He looked at her with quiet sadness. Because someone once showed me the sun when I only saw mirrors. She frowned in confusion. A child? He smiled. A child. And she saved us all. Outside, Rosa and Lila waited on the courthouse steps. The crowd parted as Leonard approached. Lila held a small bouquet of white tulips, her mother's idea, purity after ash. When he reached them, the girl lifted the flowers. For you, she said. Mama says they grow better when the roots find light. He took them carefully, as though holding something holy. Your mother is a wise woman, he said. Rosa smiled softly. Not wise, just grateful. You gave us more than work. You gave my daughter belief. Leonard shook his head. No, she gave it to me. They walked together down the marble steps. The cameras flashed, but Leonard didn't flinch. For the first time, he wasn't trying to manage an image. He was living one. Lila tugged his sleeve. Did we win? He looked at her, eyes tired but bright. We didn't win, little one. We remembered. And that's better. That evening, Geneva glowed gold in the rain. At Helion's old headquarters, now being dismantled for conversion into a public research center, Leonard stood in the empty atrium where it all began. He placed the tulips in a glass vase beside the framed crayon drawing of a yellow sun. On the marble floor, faint scorch marks still lingered, ghosts of fire. He looked up at the towering windows, their surface clean but imperfect, speckled by raindrops. Even glass, he whispered, can keep warmth. As the city lights flickered on, he saw Rosa and Lila waiting outside in the reflection. He smiled, then turned off the last remaining light of Helion's empire. When he stepped into the rain, he felt weight leave his shoulders. Not just guilt, but time itself. He was no longer the man who owned the wind. He was the man who had finally let it go. Later that night, in a small lakeside cottage, Rosa lit a candle and handed Lila an envelope with the Helion seal. It came for you, she said. Lila opened it carefully. Inside was a short letter in Leonard's handwriting. You reminded me what loyalty feels like. Pure, wordless, golden. Keep drawing the sun, Lila. The world needs to remember its shape. At the bottom, a signature, LV, and beneath it, a small sketch of a yellow circle drawn in crayon. Lila pressed the paper to her heart. Outside, lightning flickered once across the lake. But it wasn't frightening anymore. It looked almost like light breaking through. A year had passed since the night of fire. Winter was fading from the Alps. And the wind that once roared across Helion's mountains now moved softly, as if the world itself had learned to breathe again. The mansion, reborn from ash, no longer belonged to power. Its gates stood open, its marble halls echoing with laughter. On the bronze plaque by the entrance, new words were carved: the Loyal Light Foundation, for every child who still believes warmth can live in glass. Inside, sunlight poured through windows once blackened by smoke. Children ran through the corridors, their footsteps bright as bells. Rosa Delgado, now director of Helion Estate, walked among them, carrying notebooks and crayons instead of cleaning rags. She had stopped wearing the gray uniform of service. Now she wore white, simple, clean, free. "Careful with the paints, niños," she said, smiling. "Remember, walls can listen." From the far corner, Lila's voice chimed. "Then I'll tell them something beautiful." Her laughter filled the air, carrying light into the corners where ghosts once lived. Upstairs in what used to be the control room, Leonard Varez sat at a wooden desk facing the mountains. No monitors, no blinking lights, only a single window, open to the sound of children below. He was thinner now, hair silver like dawn snow, but there was a serenity in his face. The calm of a man who had finally stepped out of his own shadow. He opened his worn leather journal. The first page was dated 3 years ago. Project Helion, Power Without Borders. The last entry, written that morning, read, "We built walls of glass to control the wind, but the child taught me, light doesn't need control. It only needs to be let in." He smiled faintly, dipping his pen again. A knock at the door. "Come in," he said. Rosa entered, carrying tea. "You work too much, senor," she teased. "Even ghosts deserve rest." He chuckled. "I'm no ghost anymore, Rosa." She placed the cup beside his notebook. "Then, live like it." She looked around the room, now transformed. The walls, once lined with screens, now held paintings, all by Lila. There was the sun over the mountains, the house that could smile, and 3 hands holding paper. Her most famous piece, inspired by that night she had seen the truth through a crack in the door. "It's strange," Rosa said softly. "This place used to frighten me." Leonard nodded. "Because it listened only to fear. Now it listens to laughter." They shared a quiet moment, both thinking of the past, of the night when fire nearly consumed them, and how somehow it had lit the way home. Outside, Lila sat in the garden, sketching beneath a tree newly planted that spring. A brass plaque at its base read, "In memory of Adrian Cole, who told the truth before the world was ready." She didn't fully understand the name, but she knew it mattered to the man upstairs. When she looked up, she saw him watching from the balcony. She waved. He waved back, smiling. Rosa called from the veranda, "Lila, class begins soon." "1 minute, Mama," she shouted, adding the last stroke of yellow. It was always yellow, always the sun. But now, instead of drawing it alone in white paper, she drew it shining over a field of people, all looking up together. That afternoon, journalists visited, not for scandal, but for inspiration. The world wanted to know about the Loyal Light Foundation, the program funding education for over 10,000 children across Europe and Africa. But Leonard avoided interviews. He let Rosa speak for him. "Why name it Loyal Light?" one reporter asked. Rosa smiled. "Because loyalty is not obedience. It's love that stays, even when no one's watching. That's what saved us." Lila tugged her sleeve. "And light," she added, "because it doesn't judge. It just helps you see." The cameras clicked, but the girl didn't pose. She just smiled up at the clouds, her fingers stained yellow with crayon. That evening, when the guests were gone, Leonard wandered through the mansion alone. He stopped before the rebuilt grand piano, its surface gleaming beneath the warm light. His reflection looked back, older, but lighter. He placed one hand on the keys. The note rang clear, filling the hall. He thought of Miranda Keene, now serving her sentence in a rehabilitation program. He had received her last letter months ago. "I still dream of fire, but I'm learning to draw again. Maybe one day I'll draw something golden." He closed his eyes, whispering, "Then maybe the world still has a chance." Later that night, Rosa found him asleep in the armchair by the fireplace. The journal lay open on his lap. She picked it up gently, reading the unfinished line. "A child drew the sun. I only followed its light." A tear slipped down her cheek. She closed the journal softly and set it on the mantel, beside a framed photograph. Rosa, Lila, and Leonard in the garden. The first photo he had ever agreed to take since coming back. The fire crackled. The room smelled of rain and lavender. Outside, the night hummed with the low song of cicadas and the faraway bells of Geneva. The next morning, the mansion woke with laughter again. Children filled the halls, teachers called out lessons, and Rosa's voice echoed from the staircase. "Breakfast, everyone!" Lila ran to the balcony, clutching her sketchbook. The sun had just risen, painting the Alps in a gentle gold. She whispered into the light, "Good morning, Senor Leonard." No answer came, but the wind stirred, soft and playful, flipping her sketchbook open to a blank page. She smiled and began to draw. By noon, the garden filled with color. Yellow tulips, white daisies, red poppies. The same soil that once held ashes now held roots. The air shimmered with life. In the main hall, visitors often stopped before the painting that hung above the staircase. The crayon sun, the very first drawing Lila had ever given him. Beneath it, in Leonard's handwriting, one final inscription. "Even glass can keep warmth. Even ghosts can find peace." And when the evening light streamed through those same windows, fractured by the glass, softened by time, it scattered across the floor in golden fragments, like pieces of a broken sun finally coming home. The mansion sighed, alive once more. No longer haunted, no longer cold, just warm. Quietly, deeply, eternally warm.